And we're live. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Bam and I are on two different parts of the world. It's still light out for both of us.
Yep,
We're somewhat in
that's right.
sync. We're really excited to have our tribe talk today. And if you're watching this in our other channels and not in Crowdcast itself, we would love to invite you to come play here where it's a little bit more interactive. So you might be watching this tribe talk right now. Maybe it's on our Facebook page, our YouTube channel, wherever in the wild, wild west online that you're watching this. Where the real show is happening is on our Crowdcast platform, where you can communicate with us, ask questions, and be a part of our community here. And it's really a good place to be because this is where you sort of get our attention on any questions that you have about your freelance career, your consulting business. And really what we're here to talk about is how to avoid side hustle burnout. So if you have a side hustle that you're working on right now, you're starting out, I bet you have tons of questions about how to juggle maybe a full-time job you're working with, or really just learn how to juggle your time and your energy, which isn't easy for a lot of us that have only been trained to work in corporate and sort of have these SOPs of what we do every day. And all of a sudden, wow, freedom is lovely, but scary when you are now in control of your own time and your focus. So we are going to jam all about that today and how to really be more effective in your energy management and be able to deal with having side hustles in your life. And Pam and I are here to answer questions for you as we do this tribe talk. So come and join us from Crowdcast. The links should be on the post that you see this live stream or below in the comments, okay? And if you are here in Crowdcast, do say hello to us in your chat box. I know some of you can be quite shy, but just say your name, where you're from. I'm obviously in Southeast Asia right now. I'm from Vancouver myself, actually, originally. You can see a picture of Vancouver right behind Pam, actually. She's not from Vancouver, but she's a fan. And I know she would like marry me to get a passport there these days. Lee from Texas, you've got your fellow American here. Yeah, say hello, what you're here, excited to learn about, what you would love to get more help on when it comes to juggling your side hustle as well. Bettina, who is our lovely community ambassador that you see all the time when we have these tribe talks. Bettina is the online business manager for Screw the Cubicle, and she's our friendly ambassador here to help you with anything you need as we conduct this tribe talk and be able to get your questions answered as well. Now, if you've never been to Crowdcast before, just a quick little housekeeping before we get started. You'll see Pam and I on screen, obviously, and there's a couple of menu items that you can use to really interact with us. So you can see the Ask a Question menu, and this is sort of how we get organized with all the questions. So as more people come in during this broadcast, they might be typing in, or you might be typing in your questions on the chat box, but we might miss it if it's, the whole thread of conversations going on. So make sure that when you do have a question, as we're talking, or as things come up for you, or if you have a question right now, click on the Ask a Question tab and submit your questions ahead of time, because we're going to do a Q&A and a bit of a rapid fire round of questions being answered at the end of our chat. So make sure you use that. There's also a poll going on. We like to do these polls to get to know you better so that we can provide even more effective content going forward for you guys. So the question for today is, what's your biggest struggle when it comes to managing your focus, time, and your energy while you build your side hustle? So give us a vote there and let us know what's your burning exhaustion point or your burning question that you would love for us to get more clear for you for in other contents that we have coming up. And of course, as usual, we would love for you to share this tribe talk. Now, a lot of people in your life may also be having a dream in the back burner, have been thinking about starting something on the side. And so if you can help us share this tribe talk, the replays are going to be available there as well. It's by going to the top right-hand corner, and there's an invite button there that helps you to share in your social media channels and invite some of your friends to come hang out in the time that we have together. Oh, we've got someone from Australia, Catherine. from Adelaide. I'm noting to listen to this while parenting my 2 and 5-year-old. Yeah, exactly. How appropriate. So yes, interested in working with passion and not burning out. Awesome. Catherine is awesome. She's from Adelaide. I work with her actually as well, and she's an awesome business owner that is also trying to juggle it with family. And I know Pam, you have a family. I'm sure people have questions about that because people will tell me, you know, well, you can do this because you don't have kids. Right. And yeah, it's easier in a lot of ways, but also it doesn't have to be an obstacle if you don't let it to be as well. All right, so we will send a replay out. So for you guys that do have the kids and have to cook and do whatever you do, just keep us on, you know, if you're cooking and you want to listen to us while you cook or get ready for the day or whatever you're doing. But know that if you signed up on Crowdcast to get in here, you will get the replay. And the replays are great because you can actually reply to us in the email to ask further questions if you need to, but you don't miss out in case you have to jump off early or anything like that. So we will be sending that out to you and making sure that you get that. All right, so you're in the right place if, as I said, you are someone that's starting a side hustle, you're trying to juggle all the things, and you want to get a little bit more mindful about how you're managing your time, your energy, and your focus. And this Tribe Talk is brought to you by the Academy of Cubicle Crashers, which is our flagship community program at Screw the Cubicle, where we really help you to create a transition plan from that 9 to 5, create a meaningful business where you do work that really matters, and be in a part of an intimate community to create, grow, and launch your business. We definitely can't do that alone. And Pam, who you see here, is one of our Cubicle Crashing students at the Academy. And this is really a taste of these conversations. I mean, we usually have conversations like this, don't we, at the Academy? And we all have different types of strategies that have worked for all of us. So, you know, when we leverage this collective intelligence of community, we know more about what to do because someone else very likely have done the mistakes, have done the things that we're trying to do, and can give us some insight about what it feels like to go through that stage or what it feels like to, you know, believe something that maybe isn't true anymore, you know, in the entrepreneurship world. So we're so excited to have you, Pam, because you're someone that has been an entrepreneur for a while, but you're also starting a side hustle right now. And there's lots of things I'm sure you've learned in your journey that's going to be so valuable for a lot of us starting our journey or ones that are in it and burning out right now. We all know what that really feels like. So one of the things that before we get started is a lot of people have been asking about when is that next intake coming up for the Academy, because we only run it twice a year. And the good thing is it's happening again later on this summer. We're going to have our new intake starting in August. So we will have doors open in mid-July. We'll email you and make sure that you are kept abreast about when that launch opens. But if you click on the button right underneath this video at Join the Academy, you can be actually on our wait list and you get a chance to talk to me ahead of time before we sort of open doors to the public. So if that's something you've been looking at or you've been interested in, that's something you can do now and start talking to me to see if you're the right fit for this Academy. So here's what Pam and I are going to be talking about today. We're going to talk about how to manage your focus, your time, and your energy when you're transitioning from a primary gig to building a side hustle. We'll also talk about how Pam manages and services multiple clients. So sometimes this happens when you have two types of businesses you're focusing on, or maybe you already have a consulting business of some kind, just like Pam, she's a lawyer, but she has this other side hustle that has a different type of clientele. And how does that work for her in terms of her time management and energy management? We'll also talk about sort of where your energy leaks and your time leaks are happening and your client expectations. How do you make sure that you're not sort of at the beck and call of all your clients where they're waking you up at 3 a.m. to get something urgently, and how to set up particular systems in place to not make that happen. And then I'm going to pick Pam's brain on sort of her favorite tools that she uses to manage her time and what sort of, you know, I hate using the word hacks, but, you know, the easiest route of least resistance that she uses to juggle this law practice she has and a book coaching business that she has. And finally, one of the biggest topics that I love talking about that I don't think we talk about enough on is self-care. How important self-care and time, personal time for ourselves is so important in our success, right? And in this perseverance of this journey that if we're exhausted and burning out, no one gets to benefit from that state of mind. So we're definitely going to talk about that. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our Tribe Talk guest, Pam Donison. So Pam is a writer, an attorney, and an entrepreneur. She's also an award-winning journalist, feature writer, and editor during her active duty tour in the U.S. Air Force in the 80s. So her many, I mean, you've done all the things, haven't you? You've had many array of experiences that have spanned from a magazine editor to public affairs manager. You've been an acquisitions manager for a publishing house, and you graduated your law school. I didn't know this actually until I read this part of your bio, that you graduated law school just shy of your 40th birthday, which is awesome.
That's right. That's right.
And you worked for other people for about 7 years, and then you opened your law firm in 2006, and now you have this law practice at DonisonLaw.com. But you also today have been working on helping creatively frustrated professional women to nurture their creative spark through writing retreats and your web-based writing labs and one-on-one mentoring. And we're going to dig into how this idea really sparked for you. Welcome to Tribe Talk, Pam. Thank you so much for showing up and sharing your story and giving us all your insights. All right. And Heather's originally also from Toronto. She's here tuning in from Kuala Lumpur. We've got such a global United Nations crowd here, which is awesome. All right,
Jen. Hey, Heather. Hey, Lee. Hey,
let's start with your story. I mean, most of us do know you've been here before on a Tribe Talk chat show, but some of us are new to your face. So why don't we start a little bit about, well, let's start with this cubicle crashing journey you've had so far. How did you transition from, this law industry that you had, started your own practice, and then now this new pivot to your new side hustle?
Well, that whole sort of crazy windy road landed me here, and I really started my entrepreneur journey when I was working for other people in other law firms, and I was just sort of done. Talk about burnout, working 60+ hour weeks and having a really hard time getting a vacation because of trial schedules. My litigation calendar was at the point that I was, on more than one occasion, I was sitting in a hotel room with faxed documents appearing telephonically for a hearing while my family was out having fun. And I was just like, this is crazy. My husband was getting a little bit resentful, like, again, I thought we were on vacation. And so, that kind of thing wears on you after a while. And it was a lot of stress, and I was just done with that whole scene. And so I wanted out, and I wanted to transition, into a more peaceful way of practicing law. And the only way to do that was to start my own practice, which I did. And, a dozen years later, I'm looking around saying, I used to have a passion for writing, and it's dead on arrival. And I would really like to resuscitate that creative drive. Right. And so I decided that I needed to do something around that. So I went to a writing workshop. And lo and behold, one of my law school classmates was there. I saw her across the room, like, whoa, hey, Shannon. And we sat down to dinner one night and said, this is okay. This workshop is okay, but it's not feeding our soul. This is not what we would really love from a writing retreat. And so what would we like? And so we sort of made a list, and there were basically none of the things that we were getting at that workshop. And so we decided that if we wanted that, and we're professional women, Shannon's also a lawyer, we both own our own businesses. If we wanted that, then surely other professional women would want the same thing. A getaway, a respite from our calendar and our phone and the email to sort of sink in and be creative and let that part of ourselves thrive a little bit. So we decided to do that, and here we are. And so it's almost 2 years later since that conversation. Yeah. And we've now had a couple of retreats, and we run a weekly writing group, which is Book and Bone Club, and things are, moving right along. Excellent. But I still have a law practice. So yeah, we're going to talk about that time management part
for sure. I mean, it's so interesting that this idea came because the UnBound Writers sort of came to you from your own struggle, right? And that's a great thing to talk about, because I think people sort of tend to look a lot around what business should I start and what fuels my soul. And actually, you are the case study in a way, like what you struggle with and what you find frustrating, for example, in any regard of your life. That is sometimes a great in on discovering an idea.
Right.
You know, and something that you're passionate about, something that you want to spend more time on, which is not always related to your resume, right? Like it's
right.
You know, like it doesn't have to be related. But actually, as you went down that rabbit hole of creative writing, didn't you sort of discover, like, wait a second, I did used to work for a publishing house. I did used to help authors do this and that. Like, when was that moment you sort of pieced it together to go, I actually do know how to do this, like, you know, without it being a complete different business that you think you've never done before?
You know, I suffered from what I think most of us suffer from, which is imposter syndrome. And I felt like, am I really qualified for this? I mean, I don't have a best-selling novel. I don't have, you know, a Master of Fine Arts degree. I don't have those things. But then I was reminded in a conversation with a friend that I used to be an acquisitions manager for a division of Harcourt Brace, which used to be kind of a big deal, you know, as far as a publishing company. And so obviously I do know what I'm doing. I do know how to get books written. And part of my job as acquisitions manager was coaching non-professional writers, medical professionals who really didn't have the training. I was coaching them to write their books for us, for our publishing company. And I came up with a system for that. And, you know, it worked. And that experience really translates seamlessly to what we're doing now with UnBound Writers. And the fun part is that I get to overlay the creative writing part onto that system. And so that makes it just a lot of fun.
Yeah. And when you think about the authors that you do, because you can sort of help anyone that want to write a book, and there's sort of every genre, every type of author, every type of motivation behind that. Like what sort of, when you and Shannon were starting this business and sort of thinking about who do we really want to help? How did you decide on who that real ideal person is that you want to help? And why was it so important for you to help these types of people specifically?
Well, we initially thought, because we're lawyers, and lots of lawyers want to write books. It's kind of weird.
Their secret identity behind
their secret passion is to be, you know, a best-selling author. And so we first thought, well, we would like to work with other lawyers who we know the gig, right? We know all about that group of people. We know what their struggles are. And then we did a beta test of our retreat, and the feedback that we received from the people who attended, which was coincidentally all women. Although a couple of men had signed up, they ended up not participating in our beta test. And so we had all women, and we queried them as to whether they would prefer to be in an all-women group or in a mixed gender group. And to a person, they said all women. And these were all lawyers who were in our beta test. And their reason was that they had been bashing their head up against the glass ceiling in the legal world for so long. They really didn't want to deal with that on their creative time. They, you know, they said, we just feel safer. We feel safer sharing our stories. We feel safer being vulnerable with, you know, creative writing, which can be very soul bearing. And we feel safer in the camaraderie, that we can say things and they won't be taken out of context or, you know, that kind of thing. So we immediately determined that, okay, it should be women only. And then one of the women who had been invited to the beta because of her experience as an educator said, you know, I don't know why you're limiting this to just lawyers. Then I went to a writing conference and met a great group of women, and they're like, wait a minute, we're professional women and we're not lawyers and we want to do this too. And I thought, well, of course you do. So you know, that's how it sort of organically came about.
Well, I love that, because I think what you did there was strategic, even though at the time you didn't know it, or you didn't know it at the time. But it was the power of asking is a strategy, isn't it? We forget that actually we don't have to guess about what we want creating and who should we serve. If you just have to get out there and start asking, what do you want? What feels safe for you in these conditions to be in a group like that? And I think, I mean, we could have a whole new conversation just on this, by the way, on the power of asking to formulate, you know, your business. But I'm so glad you did that, because that helped you to create the safe container for the needs of these women who didn't want to bare their soul, and probably have a bit of PTSD from doing it at the corporate law office or corporate offices, where they weren't allowed to show emotions as much, and maybe they were playing in sort of a male-dominated industry, you know, and so forth. And it's hard to talk about actually women's life. You know, a career woman that is out there as a professional has different issues at times than a professional man. Like, we have to have children, and you know, until we can pass that buck on, we sort of you know, we have other pressures in society to be a great mom and an amazing professional person, you know, and this passionate writer. I mean, there's so many roles to play, and sometimes we do put that book passion in the back burner because we have to show up in a different role, you know, for us to sort of be effective, you know, as a woman in the world. And so those conversations could be very different, I think, from women to men. So that's awesome. And what a great share, because I think that's a nice note for a lot of people that are thinking about, you know, what should I do for my business and what should I offer, is actually start talking to the people that you anticipate helping, because they really help you to understand what you need to create to serve their needs. And you don't have to do that alone, you know, in your guessing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well,
and I think it's important to ask just the very pointed question. Are you comfortable? Yeah. Would you be more comfortable if X? You know, very pointed, and listen to the response.
Yeah. I think anyone that deals with a sort of human to human type of business, you know, I think we need to get human-like about that conversation, because as you said, when we're dealing with people, feeling safe and feeling heard and feeling like the conditions that they're about to step into are comfortable is super important for the buying process, isn't it? And saying yes to your services.
Absolutely.
All right, Pam, let's talk a little bit about this juggling act that you've had to do between balancing on working on two very different businesses. Sometimes they interconnect, because maybe, I don't know, there's some professional women that would go through your law firm and potentially could be clients for the coaching business, the book coaching business. But I think most of the time they are quite separate, right? In the activities that you're managing, what you do in each business. So how do you manage that? How do you balance this act of working on two very different businesses and then being organized in your time and energy while you do that?
Well, planning is everything. So if I don't plan my day, then the next thing I know, I've watched 6 cat videos, you know, so that's just the way it is. Right. And I think that's true for everybody. But I was taught, you know, when I was a baby lawyer, you know, even though I wasn't a baby human, I was a baby lawyer.
Right.
And the first assignment I got at my new job at my fancy little boutique firm was, here's a whole packet of timesheets in 6-minute increments and track everything you do from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., including going to the bathroom, getting a cup of coffee, checking your text messages, everything. Everything. And it didn't matter what was on there, because it was for my purposes, for my information. But the partners wanted to know that I could focus my time and that I could track it, because you bill, you know, by the hour as an attorney. So they want to be sure that you know how to capture that time for billing, but more importantly, to know where the time sucks go. You know, when there's a black hole that your time goes away, where did it go? And just that awareness, that mindfulness around how you spend your time is huge. And using that then as a planning tool it's now sort of second nature to me. So every Monday morning, I spend the first part of my day looking at, you know, what I have ahead of me in the week and setting out my calendar for the week, knowing that you have to allow transition time between tasks. And so when I have my law firm work over here and I have UnBound Writers work over here, it's really easy for me to look at my calendar and see that I blocked these chunks of time for firm work, client work, UnBound work, trainings, something like this, a meeting, that alone helps you sort of organize your mind better, because that thought pops up, oh my God, I've got to do X for UnBound. You know what? I don't have to worry about it because I've already got it on my calendar. It's already, it's already color coded, I
do love the color codes.
Yes.
Now,
so it's that kind of thing.
There's always, I've been hearing a lot of different ways that people sort of get productive, right, with their time. And I think everybody works differently. I don't think there's sort of one set in stone way, right? And I think a huge part of that is experimenting, isn't it? About what works for you. Because some people work in like a huge sprint where they're like one full 8 hours and then they take the next day off. And then some people are like small chunks, and that works for their personality. Now, I find it really useful when we've talked about theme days in the past before, where I particularly work well because my brain is a little ADD. Like, actually, I'm pretty sure I do have ADD. And when I am doing multiple things at once, even though back in the day, I used to think this was like a superpower, being able to multitask. I use that a lot in interviews. But then I realized actually the exhaustion I feel, or the strain that I had on my brain, was not productive at all. So what I found really worked for me and my business, and especially when I was transitioning from corporate, working like 2 jobs and a side hustle, is theming my days according to the same types of activities. So for example, if I'm writing a blog or filming videos, I do that all on content days, which is a Thursday. And I don't do anything to do with like, curriculum planning or social media, whatever it is, because it sort of distracts me. And I work on theme days. How does it work for you? How do you block your time? When do you know when to work on UnBound Writers, and when do you work on your law stuff? Is it like half a day on something, half a day on something else? How does that work for you in your routine?
Part of it is dictated by client meetings. And so I'll give you an example. Day before yesterday, I had a client meeting at 10 in the morning that would go for 2 hours. And so I know that prior to that, I'm not going to get a whole lot done, because I'm going to be thinking about the client meeting. And, even if I'm not working on it, my head is already sort of working on it. Right. So when I have that kind of thing that's sort of in the middle of the morning, I know I'm not going to get much done beforehand. And so the afternoon then, I know that I've got a block of time from 1 o'clock till 5 that I can work on something. And I do better if I can do about 2-hour blocks. That's about the extent of my focus. After 2 hours, I really need to get up and do something different. So that's how I look at it, is wherever there's, one of those color-coded blocks with a client meeting, I work around that and put in other blocks of time. I don't do theme days. That has not really worked for me because I've got 47 different types of tasks that I'm looking at. Right. Like if I need a month of theme days, so that doesn't really work that well. But what I do is I block every Monday morning, and I don't work on Fridays. So my office is closed on Fridays, and Friday is the day that I can really focus on a bigger task, something that's going to take all day. Or I can break it up and have 3 chunks of time working on different things. I'm also a little bit ADD, and so it actually works for me to switch and transition between tasks so that I don't start, looking out the window and getting antsy. Yeah, right. And then doing those things that we do, like get up to get more water, and then wash 5 dishes. And then or go out to lunch, and the next thing you know, you're running 5 errands. So it works for me to
I
have
love
those
that sort
blocks.
of. I think, for people that don't, because I think that sometimes when people say I don't have enough time, that usually really means I don't know where my time is being spent, right? What do you think is sort of is going on when someone says, I don't have enough time. I've got kids, I've got a job. And, you know, what's actually really happening instead of what they're saying?
Their time's leaking. It's leaking out all over the place. So we all get a bucket of time every day. And if you've got a bunch of holes in your bucket, the next thing you know, it's 6 o'clock. The kids are hungry. The dog is hungry. The husband's hungry. And you don't even know what you did that day. And those are time leaks. And so tracking your time is one great way, you know, to make sure that you're not allowing things to leak. And I think it takes, especially with social media, it takes an enormous amount of discipline to say, I'm not going to answer emails in that first 3 hours of the day. I'm not going to look at my phone at all for the first 3 hours. I'm not going to answer phone calls during this 2-hour period. And that's exactly what you have to do in order to be more productive, in order to focus, you know, in order to get that deep quality flow of work. And we all want to be in that flow state, right? And what I've found for me is that I can't get into that state unless all those other things are put on the shelf. And even if it's just for an hour, you know, we don't work in an emergency room. No one is going to bleed to death if you don't answer your phone. And if they are they're calling the wrong number. They should call 911. Don't call me. And I did work in an ER once upon a time. So I can tell you with some assurance that we are not in life or death situations here with our creative writing.
So much of it is self-discipline. I mean, one of my favorite tools that I've installed years ago that it still continues to be part of, you know, my Facebook is I installed Kill Newsfeed. You know, because I didn't even realize I was scrolling. It was like a default robotic behavior. I just kept scrolling. And obviously that's a time suck. That's a time energy. And now my wall is just white. It's blank. And maybe, Bettina, you can put down the link for Kill Newsfeed. It's a Chrome download. It's free, and it actually just completely eliminates your newsfeed. And by the way, Sean, it's Kill Newsfeed. Kill Newsfeed. Let me type that in. There it is. And so I don't see any Donald Trump news because it gets me fucking angry. Like it gets me angry. I don't, you know, and yes, you could say that's ignorant, but I can get my news elsewhere. People are already telling me what's going on, whether I like it or not. It doesn't need to be in my day-to-day feed, you know? So has been, I've had that installed for 2 years now, and really it has doubled my productivity because I no longer can see it, even if my robotic default behavior goes towards it. Now, what time? I like the idea of time tracking because, as we said, people don't know where their time is being spent. They assume they don't have enough time. But you know, even doing what you did when you were a baby lawyer, you know, when they said you have to track every 6 minutes what the hell you're doing, you don't have to do that forever. But it's really good to maybe spend a week going, where is my time being spent, and be easy on yourself. Don't judge yourself about it, but just go. I just want to know. I just want to know what's going on. And how where my time is being spent so that next week I can then plan for this a bit better and make sure that I have an intention about how I start my week or how I deal with the day to day. What do you use to track your time? Is it just simply a notebook and paper, or do you have like a snazzy tool that you use?
Well, I now have a snazzy tool, but it's lawyer specific. But there are a lot of time trackers, free time tracker apps out there in the world. And I should have come prepared to talk about some of them.
I've got one called Toggle Time Tracker. Yeah,
you know, any sort of time tracker at all, anything. And even if it's just a notebook where you write it down, it doesn't matter because you're just collecting data. You know, for that first little period of time, that first week, you're collecting data. After that, the way that I use my time tracker now is I say, okay, I'm going to, I'll give an example. I'm going to write a craft lesson for the writing group for Tuesday. And I've got my hour there on my calendar that says that's when I'm going to do it. You know, sometimes it just doesn't take that long. Sometimes it's a 15-minute exercise. And so I like to know that in advance, you know, of the next time that I'm scheduling it. Now, sometimes those craft lessons take quite a bit more work. And so they're more like an hour or 2 hours of putting materials together. But I track that time. And at the end of the month, sometimes ashamedly so, I look at it and go, wow, I spent way more time than I should have doing this task. And I should, be able to hone that down, because in order for your work to be sustainable, it has to be time sensitive so that you still have lifetime left, right? I mean,
that's a good way to put it.
You can't work 18 hours a day for the rest of your life. You just can't.
Right. Yeah. And I think, in the beginning, when you're building a business as well, we don't account for the learning time, isn't it?
Right.
I mean, Heather, you're here, you're part of the academy as well, so we get to see what you're doing every day. And that's a conversation Heather and us in the tribe has been having around, oh my God, it takes longer than I anticipated, to get something done, right? There's a learning curve that happens when we're learning something new, because very likely for at least the first year in your business, you're learning something quite foreign, like how to build a website, how to do these sort of different things. And you're learning forever in your business. But in the beginning, it's a little bit harder because everything seems really new. And what would usually take an hour could take 2.
Right.
Because there's a learning curve of research and all sorts of things, right? So I think that's a good note to tell people, is that block more time than you anticipate. Because even if you got it done 15 minutes rather than an hour, now you've got bonus time to go and take a walk or do whatever, but at least you're not struggling, with going, oh my God, I need to add in another hour, because you've pre-planned for this. And until you get better at more familiar with the way that you're working or what you're working on, then you can be a bit more consistent, right? In those blocks of time. And the time tracking helps with that, because you can then see in real life going, wow, a blog post that I thought would take half an hour, it took an hour and a half. Why? Why did it take an hour and a half? Well, maybe I went into some research rabbit hole that took up half an hour when I was busy looking at other people's blogs, when I should have been writing my own and not have my comparison syndrome thing. And maybe that's where you can catch yourself in behaviors that are time leaking, right? But you're not going to change until you know what the hell is actually really happening with your time. So that's a really, really good point.
That's right. But I think the other value of that time tracking over a longer period of time, as you start your business up, as you launch, is that at some point when you're looking at pricing your services, you'll know how to price, because you'll know how much time it takes. So instead of saying, hey, I'll ghostwrite your book for $100. I mean, no. That's not going to happen. We're not going to solve world hunger in 2 weeks. So it helps us then put together a more realistic picture of how much time it really takes to do these tasks. So if you track it over a period of months, you'll get a pretty good feel for how long it takes you to do certain things. So then when you're doing your pricing, you can do it appropriately and not underprice or overprice yourself.
Excellent. Yeah, that's a good note to have. Well, now that we're talking about clients, let's talk a little bit more about juggling multiple clients. And I know a lot of people, actually, it may not even be multiple clients. You could be juggling clients in your side hustle while working a full-time job and having a completely different mandate there. But there's a lot of people that are consultants, for example, that are freelancing something but building a business on another business on the side. So there could be multiple clients that they're juggling in their business. Now, you are someone that obviously manages different types of audiences, different types of needs. What do you think people usually make mistakes on or don't anticipate that can happen when they're working with clients? And what's your advice around managing multiple clients in a business?
For me, one of the best tools that I have is a spreadsheet where I keep the entire list of clients, their basic information, and then as deadlines come up, they get entered in the spreadsheet. And I review that every Monday morning. So it is malpractice for an attorney to miss a deadline. Right. So, it's something that, I take really seriously, whether it's an UnBound Writers client or it's a law client. That's ingrained in me now. And so I look at that spreadsheet every Monday morning and I say, okay, who's got stuff coming up? That all moves then to my to-do list. And then that gets translated onto my calendar. So just that quick review, and it only takes, a few minutes, depending on how long your client list is, to review it and update it. And that is sort of the master tool. And I think that really helps to not only reminds you that you've done a lot of things, which is important, but it also helps to remind you this is what's on your plate this week. You can weave everything else around these mandatory tasks.
Yeah. You have to pick sort of a primary focus, because there's multiple things that will happen in your business that never ends, but clients are the ones paying the bills. So they are a primary focus. And anything, as you said, plan around it and know that 80% of your time is very likely spent on client work, especially if you're a consultant or a service-based person. And then the other 20% potentially is the, like writing your blog for the month, or filming a quick live stream, whatever it is that you do beyond that. But we have to focus on clients. Now, what about, one of the things that I get a lot of questions on is managing these clients, not just on a productivity level, but like expectations and managing relationships. Because I mean, all of us have worked with like dream clients, and we've worked with like really nightmare clients. And sometimes, there's a way to start that relationship where there are particular boundaries already put in place, and maybe being a lawyer, you can talk a bit about that. It's like, what sorts of terms should we think about when we work with different clients? What do we need to get real with before we start to say, yes, sign this agreement, pay this money? What are things that we should start thinking about of making sure our clients know about before we start working with them? And what do we need to actually be getting ready for when we start with clients?
Setting boundaries and expectations with clients is really the best way to ensure that you are delivering the services that they're expecting, right? So you've given them the expectation. This is what I will deliver to you. And it's not, it's sort of an autocratic, there's no vote. You don't get a vote when you're working with me. This is how I work.
Yeah.
And it can be sometimes uncomfortable when a client says, well, but what if something happens on the weekend? And guess what? Things are going to happen on the weekend, and I'm not available. I'm just simply not available. Clients have asked for my, mobile phone, and, can they call me weekends, and, that sort of after hours, whatever. And the answer is just always no. My hours are 9 to 5, period. Now, that is not actually true, because I may go and, see an email that I think, oh, I really want to look at this right now, and it's 8:30 at night, and I may go look at it, and I may even draft a response to it, but I will not hit send until the next morning at 9 a.m. because I don't ever want to set that expectation that if you put urgent, then I'm going to snap to it, because then you create your own monster. So part of it, part of that happens in my fee agreement with clients, where I say very bluntly that when we're working together, you're not my only client, and other client needs may rise to a higher level of urgency than yours, and we will do everything we can to manage that. I let clients know that when I'm out of the office, I'm literally out. I'm not going to answer their email. I'm not going to respond to phone calls. And if it's an emergency, then they need to call the police, because I can't help them, right? Because the court is not a place for emergencies. The police are places for emergencies. And so I think part of it is just educating and training clients to understand that whatever you're doing for them, whether you're consulting with them on their website or helping them write a book or whatever it is, here's the boundaries. This is when I work, this is how I work, and this is who I work with. And when you're clear about that, I think not only do people respect it, but they adjust amazingly quickly.
Yeah, and you teach your clients how to treat you in a way, right? Because you're not saying that I'm never available. You're saying I'm available, but in these terms, on these terms, and in these conditions, right? So it's not to say I'm not here, but it's giving them a boundary of here's when I am available. And I think that is a really good, because some people feel that when they have these boundaries, they're not serving the client. They're letting them down in some way. Right. But you're not. It's a balance of you've got to also have enough energy to continue. And if you don't, nobody wins, in that regard. I like the idea of where you can work on an email after hours, but not send it, because that's an interesting one where you're right. Like that little move of sending it at 9 o'clock at night, they might look at it and go, "Oh, Pam's actually working at 9," and then it could plant the seed. And I was actually just going to mention a tool that I think could be helpful to people with inboxes to be able to do this. So one of the tools that I use is called Boomerang for Gmail, and Boomerang is free for a Gmail account where. Well, it does a few things. One is that it allows you to send emails in certain times. So you can send it an hour from now, a particular date. And so you can do that drafting of the email at 9 o'clock, but they don't get it till 9 in the morning. And so then you can just get it off your plate and know that the machine will send it off at a certain time.
Right.
The other thing that Boomerang does, which I really like about client management, is like, for example, if you emailed a proposal or you need to follow up with, someone that you needed to follow up with without having a whole list of people and getting all crazy, is that you can click on the remind me option on Boomerang, where it can remind you in 2 days, it can remind you in 3 hours. And so it sort of boomerangs back to bounces back to your email, and it gives you a reminder that, hey, this client needs a follow-up, and that is awesome. The second thing that I think is great for tracking, let me just actually write that on Boomerang. Okay, Bettina's on it. The other tool that I really like is called HubSpot. So we talked about client management with CRMs, and you could have a spreadsheet if you like, but as your client list grows, you might want to have something, especially if you have assistants and people that you might hire in the team. HubSpot is also a free tool with Gmail that manages your client roster, but also you can set reminders and tasks and projects and what you quoted them. It's like a little database of like, when did this customer come in? How did they come in? Who are they friends with? When did we last spoke? And then you can actually use their attachment to your Gmail to log emails. So if you did send something that's urgent and you're like, okay, I need to record this thing I sent them, you just press the log attachment with the HubSpot attachment to your Gmail, and it logs every email to their account. So you can actually go through in record what's happened in your client management. So HubSpot for Gmail is the other tool that we can use there. Oh, there it is, HubSpot.com. Perfect. Thanks. That was excellent.
And also, if any of you are using Outlook, like that's what I use on my desktop, a lot of those tools are built right into Outlook as well.
Yeah, awesome.
You can schedule, you can track, you can get follow-ups and so on.
So what has been, talking about tools, what has been your go-to tools for managing your time and your energy? So what would you use usually when you plan your week, and what it is that you can't sort of live without? And it doesn't have to be digital tools. It could be just actually a practice or something that you do to sort of get good with the time management that you have.
Well, my calendar is Outlook, and so that's the tool that I use for my blocking my time and scheduling and so on. It's my email as well. And there's a tool that I use for that called Simplifile. And it's an app, and Simplifile allows you to, we all have folders, our different folders for emails, but Simplifile automatically files your response and the original email. It will nudge you to file things that come in after that. So that's an easy way to make sure that you're, filing things where they need to be. And I don't keep any paper. So everything that I have is, if it doesn't come to me electronically, it's scanned and goes into an electronic file so I can access it when I'm somewhere else. Online. I use Dropbox for exchanging files with clients. I use Dropbox Pro so that it's a secure server. And there are time tracking and invoicing tools that are matched together along with my merchant services payment tool. So I use Time 59, which is, it's for lawyers, but it actually would work for any service-based industry. And that is connected then, it has its own in-house invoicing process, which is linked to a service called LawPay. So clients get the invoice via email. There's a link there. They can click on it. It takes them right to LawPay. They pay their bill. So things like that can really take it off the manual, entry of those things is critical.
Yeah.
And even if you need to pay $10 a month or whatever it is, it's totally worth it to be able to get things out the door that are not really your core business. Invoicing is not my core business. And getting payments from clients and that sort of thing. I use a bookkeeper, through my accountant, because bookkeeping is not my core business.
Right.
And it never will be. So it's things like that you can outsource that are not part of your core business that are, I think it's worth the investment.
Yeah.
Because it buys you back your time.
Totally. And I agree with that, because we aren't specialists in everything. And
that's right.
The idea of outsourcing, sometimes people think they have to be a big business in order to have a team.
Right.
But actually, it's really good practice to start, like, hiring a VA for 5 hours a week or 10 hours a week sometimes from the Philippines, that you can pay a small amount for someone junior, but at least help you with some of the menial tasks like research, filing, creating a little system in the back with Google Drive, whatever it is that is a lot of work, but it's like essential for your business to have a system. But it may not be you doing it, because the thing you should be spending most of the time doing, as you said, is the job that your clients pay you to do.
Right.
That's the biggest thing. And look at ways that you can go on. Fiverr.com is an excellent place that I got lots of things done for myself when I was first starting out, needing a video edited or a logo design really quickly. It shouldn't be me. I'm going to spend like 5 hours trying to do that versus paying $5 for someone else to just do that into some simple way. And at least I can just keep going. Right. Which is super important.
Right. And when you think of it in the terms of your business, think about other businesses. I mean, there's zero reason for me to be typing a basic pleading. That's why you have paralegals. That's why you have legal assistants. There's no reason for me to be the person notarizing documents. I mean, that's why you have those other businesses out there in the world to service people like us. And I think it's just another way to sort of keep the economy going, pay it forward a little bit, and also to take that time suck off of your desk.
Totally. And incrementally, when you do some of these things, right, where you track you know where your energy is being spent, you're not working on things that make you frustrated and grumpy, or take longer, and you're focused on, what you do best in your business, you're going to feel less burnt out, where you could actually be still working, but the feeling of how you're working and that hour you're working is not going to feel like pulling teeth, because you're actually doing something you enjoy. That actually makes a difference, I think, when it comes to avoiding burnout. It's sometimes not about less hours, but actually about what you're spending time doing in those hours that are either bringing you pleasure or they're not. Right? So
or pain,
right? And adjusting sometimes your mindset around that is part of the process. Now, I want to sort of end this part of the interview before we go into Q&A with something very important when it comes to burnout management, which is self-care. Now, this sometimes is the last thing we do after we've done our to-do list. We maybe might do it if we have time. I mean, I know you've gone through lots of health things in your own life, that has brought you to realize how important your health is and how nothing actually really matters if you're not healthy. Why do you think it's so important for new entrepreneurs, and any entrepreneur for that matter, to block in self-care as a non-negotiable thing to do, as if it's one of their biggest priorities? And what do you do to recharge and sort of continue to be persevering towards building two businesses on your own?
Well, first of all, I think new entrepreneurs who have worked for other people for a long time fall into one of either two camps. They either don't work enough, so they're sort of like, oh, I'm going to go to the beach today, or, and they're not really getting things done. Or more commonly, they just work constantly all the time because they have this fear, like, oh my God, I've got to go, because there's no 9 to 5, right? That's over with. And when it's just this open-ended series of hours ahead of you, it can be really easy to fall into that trap of just putting your head down and going, when really your brain doesn't work that well when it's fatigued. And I think people forget that your brain and your body are one. They're not two separate entities, because I hear people a lot of the time say, well, I don't work that hard because I work at a desk. No, you're still working. You're still working hard. You know, your body is still doing stuff in the background. So building in self-care, if you are going to have a sustainable business for any period of time, you have got to have self-care, period. And not only for your body, but for your mental health. And so the things that I do, if I really need to be refreshed, I have to go into nature. And so whether I take a walk or I go for a hike or whatever it is, I need to get into nature. If I can take a little bit longer break, I go camping.
Right.
Or sometimes we, rent a house at the beach or whatever. But it's so necessary. And, you can't even recognize in yourself how bad you need it. And yet, anybody else looking at you be go, wow. You need to take a break because you're way off the rails here.
Right.
Other people can see it. We can't really see it in ourselves. We think we're fine. No, I'm fine. I can work another 6 hours. No, you can't.
Yeah.
And not only you can't, but you shouldn't.
Yeah.
Because you're not doing your best work. And so you're cheating yourself. You're cheating your own body of the respite it needs. And you're cheating your client because they're not getting the best you. They're not getting your best work. So I like to build in, I start my day with meditation, and that's a mandatory, that's on the calendar, that happens every day. And at the end of the day, at the end of the workday, I have an hour blocked off for reading. And that's mandatory. That happens every day. Unless I'm here with you.
Right.
But it's that kind of, actually I was reading before you came online. And every day I take a walk. It doesn't matter if it's 20 minutes down the road with my dog or if it's a 2-hour walk with my friend. Every single day I walk. That's a mandatory. And when I can, of course, I build in other things, hiking in a park or something like that. But if you can set the intention and the habit of building those little self-care things into every day, you're not going to get to the point where you're collapsing in an airport going, oh my God, I can't move. I can't take another step.
Yeah. And
so it's preventive maintenance.
That's what I was just going to say. That's such a good point, because people sort of tend to all of a sudden want to do self-care when they're already like on the ground. Like that moment I had, for example, when I had my meltdown in Russia in a hotel room. It had to take me having a meltdown for me to go, I think I need a therapist. I need that time. At the time I hadn't taken a break for 2 years. We wait till we're on the ground. And I think the same thing happens with health in general. Like we sort of go, oh my God, I have to actually care about exercising and things like that when the doctor told me I have a heart problem, or, and there's a preventative way that you, as you said, just because you can work 10 hours a day doesn't mean you should. I mean, there are times realistically that may have to happen.
Of course.
And we all know that. But where you're trying to make it normal for yourself is not to do that as a routine, right? So even though you think you can do it and you've survived yesterday doing it, doesn't mean that you should do it continuously, because at some point that's not good for your body. Like, I think it's something like we can't, productively work more than about 5-6 hours anyway per day. We sort of try to dwindle our thumbs, or we get distracted. So know that your best time is probably in the first 4 to 5 hours of your day, or whatever time that you're blocking off for your work. But to know that even if you don't think that you need to take a break, take it anyway. Because that's what's actually going to allow you to feel good going forward, and you don't reach that final breaking point of having a burnout. And I mean, I learned this lesson a lot when I hired a nutritionist, because I have hypoglycemia, and I was like, why am I feeling so de-energized all the time? And she said something to me that's really relevant to what we talk about right now, is that she's like, Lydia, you are waiting for when you get hungry to then eat. But by that time, your body has exhausted so much energy to tell you you're hungry, and like it's done so much to just keep you going, that when the hunger pains come, you're actually a little too late. Already your body have worked overtime in order to survive. And then the food, then you're like shoving down food down your throat, and then you get slumpy, and then you're like, you need a nap, versus, if you're eating, whether you're hungry or not in the mornings, and eating on the right time and eating little bits along the way, where you're taking a bit of nuts and a handful of this. You're never going to feel, you're not supposed to feel hungry, you know? And so that's sort of how I remember it as well with self-care. It's like, even if I don't think I need a break, go for a walk, go for a quick swim, because you will always feel better because of it.
Well, and it is banking energy for the future.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think I can speak to this. I might be one of your oldest clients. And so I'm here to tell you, here's your mommy talking. If you don't bank your energy as you're going through your 30s and 40s, when you get to your 50s, it's going to hit you like a ton of bricks. And just knowing what I know now, the hard way, I really wish that all through my 30s, 40s, and early 50s, I had been banking energy in a much more sustainable and productive way, instead of waiting until I was on the verge of collapse. I mean, I remember a time standing in the kitchen when I was in litigation practice, and we were having company over for dinner, and I completely lost it in the kitchen because the oven had not preheated on time. I mean, I just freaking lost it. Like, I think I might need a break.
Yeah.
But if you bank the energy and you bank the self-care, you won't get to that point. You know, you'll be okay.
Yeah. You'll know how to navigate conflict and all those obstacles a little bit more mindfully. Yeah.
Right.
All right. Well, before we go into Q&A, I want to make sure that people know a lot more about what you do, because we always have people that are budding writers. And I think it's amazing what you're doing with professional women, because sometimes we don't think that we have a club to go to. You know, we sort of are sick and tired of going to these conferences and networking meetings. And being in a creative zone is a very different state of mind, and is a very different part of ourselves that, needs to be nurtured as we go through life. And I think what you do for women is amazing. So where can people, well, first of all, tell us a little bit more about how can these budding writers find support and accountability at UnBound Writers, and where can we find you and what can you help us do?
Okay. So first of all, we do one-to-one mentoring. So if you need to kickstart your book project, or if you're in the middle and you're like, I'm not really sure where I'm going with this, those are times when one-to-one mentoring can really be helpful, because it's specific to your work in progress, whatever that is. The second way that we help people is through Creativity Camp. And so we do 2 live creativity camps a year in the spring and fall. Those are 4 days, a Thursday to Sunday. And it's really intended to immerse you in the creative process and also get a few thousand words on the page. Everybody usually goes home with, 4, 5, 6,000 words, which is a huge start to a book, if you can get that much done. And we like to be in sort of a rustic, natural environment. So we host our retreats at ranches. And, that has its own ambiance. It's very relaxing. There's no television, the Wi-Fi is pretty spotty, and the food's good, and the sky is dark. So, those are all great things to get from camp. Some of the people that have attended camp have said that for them, it was transformational, that it was a very supportive and caring environment, that they felt safe, that they had no problem sharing their writing, that, even though it's a vulnerable thing to do. And then finally, we have our writing group, which I mentioned earlier. It's a weekly writing group, Book and Bone Club, and we come together via Zoom. And we have craft lessons, and we write. And so those are the 3 ways that we interact with our clients. And
I love the camp idea, because it's been so long since adults have gone to summer camp. And so you get so much done, I think, when you extract yourself from your day-to-day routines and cooking for the husband and the dog and whatnot, and actually have time for yourself. But that's when the creativity comes together for you. And that's when you have time to actually nurture that muscle, and get it out there and be around people that have a similar goal. It's really awesome. So Bettina's put down the links to check out unboundwriters.com. Pam is awesome. You should say hello to her in all those different, her Facebook group is really good as well. And it's great to be around like-minded people, if that's something that you've been wanting a bit more of community. And if you know any other writers that would love to get a bit of an incubation or get some help in writing their book finally and get their life stories told in the world, please check out her site, and you're going to get tons of insights from her Facebook group and, of course, her website. All right, so we're going to move on very quickly to ask a question. We've got 2 questions there, and if anyone else here that is live with us has a question, this is the time to do it. Please go onto the Ask a Question tab, submit your question so that we can timestamp it for you. You can go straight into it as a recording if you would wish. But let's start with the first 2 questions that we have here in this tab. So the first question is, how do you manage unexpected things that come up within your day and that can throw off your schedule? Pam, what's your thoughts around that?
I always build buffers in. So when I'm scheduling out my week, for example, if I have a client meeting and it's set for an hour, I always allow an extra half hour. If I'm working on a project that I think is going to take an hour, I always allow another half hour, because, things happen. My mother will text me, and, I mean, those things happen in life, and you've just got to build in a little bit of buffer zone.
And not have
if something
really, things, isn't it? Like, because I used to do back-to-back things because I was like, oh, look at how productive I am. But there was no time, to pause or reset before the next thing I have to do. And it's so
transition. Yeah. And sometimes, you'll get completely derailed. Something, I don't know what, something bad, you'll get the flu. I don't know. And you're going to have to move your whole schedule back by 3 days. That happens. And from my perspective, it's not an emergency. You just notify everybody, I'm down with the flu. I'll be back to you next week. And again, leave a little buffer, because what if that flu hangs on for an extra day or 2, Right.
Yeah,
I've actually had it happen.
Yeah, for sure. I know you were out for the count for a while. I think, I know Heather asked this question. So, and Heather does a lot of time blocks, which she's been excellent at, and sprinting through lots of stuff for her new business. But I find that sometimes, I think there's been a time I've looked at her screenshot of her calendar, and then even looking at my own, there's been times that I literally, things are so squished together that's where the exhaustion happens. And also that's when there's no room for errors. Right. And things that can happen throughout the day. And it's great to have a gap. I do about an hour to 2 hours actually in between client calls and in between tasks that I have to do for the day. And that's really lovely, because sometimes you just actually need to take a lie down, and reset again, or take a walk. And I think that's really good to get you prepared for the next client, or, prepared for the next course of action for the day. And that is pretty non-negotiable, I think, for a good time blocking schedule.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great question, Heather. Okay, the second question here is, how do you manage competing priorities, either from clients' personal or self-care, or working on your side hustle, etc.? How do you decide what takes priority when sometimes it feels like everything is a priority?
Everything's an emergency. I've had to deal with that for a really long time, when you might have 2 trials in a week. And so you have simultaneous emergency all the way through for a couple of weeks. And really the only way to do it is to absolutely block everything else out. So if you have 2 clients they both have some very urgent or high priority, I'm not even going to say urgent because they're not, but high priority issues that need to be addressed, you probably need to move everybody else's stuff off the calendar and just deal with it, get it done. And, that's part of that client expectation setup, that if your clients know that if an urgent issue comes in, that you will pay attention to it, you'll pay attention to theirs, just like you're paying attention to the other person. So I think it's about managing the expectations. And when you've got 2 high priority things, put everybody else on the back burner for a couple of days until you can manage that. Otherwise, it's going to drive you crazy, or you're going to work 14 hours and do sort of sloppy work. It's not worth it.
Yeah. And the other thing, when I think about priorities, is because this question is very common, that is sort of like, I want to do all the things and I don't have the time for all of them. And you're right, you don't have the time for all the things. And actually, this is where we have to decide, right? And this is the hard part, because I think we try to do, we want to have our own business, but then we also want to go out and spend money in Vegas for the weekend when we don't have it. So it's like, there's always things we want to do, but we have to adult up a little bit and we have to choose. We cannot, so for example, if one of your biggest dreams right now is to start a business and pay yourself, and in the next 6 months to a year, this is where your hustle is going to be. Right? Mm-hmm. And that dream is important to you. So that means you have to learn to say no to other things that could become a priority, but you're just not going to let it become that. So we have to sort of decide that, hey, for the next 6 months, because I'm learning something new about my business, or I'm trying to get clients, I'm trying to deal with this system I'm building to make money, this is probably where I'm spending most of my time. Yes, self-care is super important, and that's, as you say, blocked in every day. But I might have to say no to taking all these big holidays that I used to take back in the day, or eating out all the time, or being able to date someone full time, maybe. Like those are realistic priorities at times, where we have to choose for a limited amount of time to focus on that, so that we're less having that FOMO thing happening, because it's not forever that is going to be like this, but you've got to put in the time. So if building a business is part of your mandate right now, that's very likely going to take up majority of your time for the next 6 months to a year. And you're not going to do some of the other things, like learn how to dance tango on, like 5 times a week, because that just is your hobby. But you might do that next year, because you got to get this in place so that you have the freedom to have more hobbies and things like that. So we just have to decide. I think sometimes things, feel like they're a priority, but they might not be. So we have to choose what it is that we want to spend time on, and what's going to make the difference in the quality of life that we're really trying to achieve, and change those priorities as things get better. Right? So 6 months or a year down the road, when your business is having more clients coming in, there's less sort of hustle to get them, or hustle to create those systems when you had to do it in the beginning of time. Now there's a bit more time released, where you can add more to your plate. And I think that's also a mindset shift that we have to do in order to not trying to do all the things.
But learning to say no is a really important life skill.
Because
if you say yes to everything, to every client, to every project, to every whatever, your lifetime will be pulled away from you. So it is important to learn to say no to even really flattering and wonderful opportunities. And sometimes it's just your ego saying yes. And it really should be you, the grounded you, the real you, saying, does this further my goal or not? Does it further my goal or not? Does it further my business or not? And that's a simple question. And if going, for a long weekend with your friends furthers your business, okay, but it probably doesn't. It probably just means that it's pulling away your time and your money and your energy. And so maybe you skip one.
And go for dinner instead with the girls. There's always a different alternative way to still continue to social and, be a part of your community, but not in sometimes this big ticket items and things like that. Okay, last question. And this question is from Jen. She says, when you're deciding to change how and when you practice law, what values of yours did you find were not in alignment? You mentioned working a tremendous amount of hours that would take you away from your family. So I can assume perhaps that was one of the values. But I'm curious to know what values you felt were out of balance, and what your breaking point was like, that moment where you finally said, fuck it, this isn't good for me. And then Jen just also said on the chat box, side note, my question in the Q&A got a bit grammatically weird because I kept editing it and hitting send too fast. What I mean to ask is about the time when you were practicing law before making changes and implementing UnBound.
My breaking point came with a very difficult case, and that's usually the story for lawyers. You get that one case that you can't sleep at night. And I was representing Dad. He was an attorney. Mom had significant mental health problems, and they had 3 little boys, like stair steps, 5, 3.5, and 18 months. And the 18-month-old, his name is Jackson. and he was hospitalized repeatedly for asthma. And he couldn't breathe. And my assistant got a call one afternoon from the pediatrician that said, there's a meeting in my office at this time. Ms. Donison needs to be there. I walk in, my assistant tells me, I'm like, why would I go to a pediatrician's office for a meeting? I'm not doing that. My client calls. His name's John. He says, you're going to the meeting because she's a very prominent pediatrician in Scottsdale. And, if she drops us from her client or her patient list, we'll never get back on. And, I really want my kids to see this pediatrician. So we went to the meeting, and the pediatrician was this tiny little Asian woman, sort of a Lydia. And she's this amazing doctor who everybody in Scottsdale knows. And she came in and she said, I called you here today because Jackson's been in the hospital for the 4th time with asthma problems. And the reason is you, and you. And she pointed at me and the parents and opposing counsel and said, every time you write a letter, every time you make a nasty phone call, every time you file a motion, this kid gets sick because he's absorbing the stress of the family. And it's child abuse, and I will not be a party to it. So, and the mom jumps up and says, you see, this is all your fault. She's pointing at dad, and the doctor gets up and slams her fist down, and she said, this is what I'm talking about. You've got 5 minutes, figure it out, or I'm not your pediatrician.
Right.
After that, I sat in the parking lot just crying because child abuse, like I can't sleep with that. I can sleep with being a really good attorney who kicks your butt and gets everything that you want in court, but I couldn't handle that label. And it had never occurred to me that what we were doing in court and what we were doing in our office was impacting a child. And that was really my moment. That was it. I went home and I told my husband, I'm out. I can't do this. And so it took a few months, to transition, but that was the impetus for starting my own practice because I knew that I didn't want to participate in that sort of system anymore.
Yeah. And how has that changed the way that you now practice law in your law firm? Like, what's changed for you so that those values are more in alignment with the way that you're working?
I do not litigate. So I'm a family law attorney who doesn't go to trial. And the reason is because it's too hard on families. It's super expensive. And when you have something that drags on for 2 or 3 or 4 years, you're not going to recover. I mean, there's a PTSD that's involved with that. So now my practice is collaborative divorce and mediation. And I help people if they want to do it themselves. I'll coach them. I'll help them draft their agreements and that kind of thing. But I don't take stuff to trial.
Yeah. I mean, I think that you made a call where you knew that if this continued to sort of be your career, at some point you're going to resent yourself and resent the work that you do.
Oh, yeah.
Because maybe it's not law being, you like practicing law, but it's the way that it was being done and maybe what cases you were involved in, that part makes the difference with, the joy or the pleasure or the alignment of values that you feel with that. Jen's saying, holy crap, are we twins? I've been asking myself how I sleep at night by the public, and it kills me. I've had cases that are similarly heartbreaking. That takes a toll. And you talked a lot about PTSD. And, I think a lot of people don't realize that sometimes when they've been a part of things, because we spend a lot of time at work. Like, it's not just a thing that just happens once every 6 months. Like, you're in that vicinity of that kind of work, like, consistently. And that eats at you if it's something that you're doing that you don't believe in, that you're contributing to. And if you're someone that is very moved about those sorts of things where you care about what you're working on, some people can like separate that and go, this is just work and this is not me. But I think majority of us, like when we're living our personal lives or in our career, we're the same person. We would hope to be the same person. So when we are not living in alignment with our highest values at work, that is going to affect your well-being. That is going to continue to make that PTSD much more severe, from that. And I think when we feel that dissatisfaction, it's not something to ignore, right? And do you think that's really, as you went into your law practice and switched things up, what now feels different? Like now, what is much more in alignment these days?
Well, that whole period of being in the mix and the vicarious trauma that comes with it. It's not really PTSD, it's vicarious trauma per the professionals. After being out of that, it takes a while for your system to sort of calm down. And I think that's true no matter what job you're in. If you're in a corporate environment, when you leave that, it takes a while for your system to sort of go, oh, we're safe now. You know, we don't have to be on high alert every minute of every day. And so now when I'm looking at, you know, my clients and my law practice, they're far more humane with one another, and therefore more humane with me. And it makes a huge difference around our interactions. You know, I used to have clients get angry with me because they didn't get their way in court, or they were disappointed because the negotiations didn't go the way they wanted, because they were all butting heads. And now it's so much more peaceful, and it's healthier for them for sure, and a lot healthier for me, because I know I'm providing a real service that's actually helping their family. Even though they're getting divorced, you know, there's ways to do it that don't mean ruining your life.
Yeah. You can have a conscious uncoupling.
That's right. That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right.
Well, on that note, that was a great question, by the way, Jen. You know, something that I think we don't talk about enough when it comes to unfulfilling work. Sometimes we just label it as I don't want to go to a 9 to 5, but there's more to it that's causing dissatisfaction. And that's actually great to look at, because it gives you clues about what you do care about. And it gives you a bit of a GPS of like, what am I really looking for when I think of a meaningful or fulfilling career? And what are those ingredients of that fulfilling career, so that when I think about starting a business or changing jobs or whatever it is to improve my quality of life, I'm looking for those qualities, you know, in a job or in a way of working. Yeah. Very good question. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us. Pam, thank you for being so generous with your time and sharing your story. I always love these conversations in our Tribe Talks. Again, you know, the links for Pam are on the chat box there. If you would like to see more of us, I mean, a lot of us here, actually, Jen and Heather that are here, are part of the Academy. If you would like to be a part of our community and have more of these conversations and get a lot more help in that supportive transition and building a business, don't forget to click on the Academy button at the bottom of this video to find out more, be on our wait list for our next intake, and jump on a call with me and see if you're a great fit for the community, because I talk to every single person that we invite to the Academy, and it is a very highly curated group of humans, because that is how important it is for us to have the right people, the right mindset, the right goals, you know, of why people are building businesses. And I think that's important to have in a community that has a similar approach of how they want to do work, not escape work, but actually do and create great work. Thank you, everybody, for joining us wherever you are. Thank you, Pam, for all your wisdom and advice. And we'll talk to you soon in our next Tribe Talk. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.